As you may or may not have heard, war never changes. And after enough playthroughs of Fallout 4, that lack of change means that players may find themselves falling into the habit of using the same loadout of weapons every time to keep up with the difficulty curve of the game and optimize damage output. But this repetition can get, well, repetitive. And it's a damn shame that there are some pretty interesting weapons that see little to no use in regular play because of their statistical inferiority. But how do you even fix such a problem? Challenge yourself to not use specific weapons? That works, but it's kinda lame and inevitably would lead to just using the next best option instead. I suggest a more creative option, one that takes the burden of restriction off of my biased human mind and leaves it entirely in the capable hands of Bethesda Softworks programming. You've already read the title of the video, so there's no sense in me being coy about what the purpose of this run is. Join me for the highlights of beating Fallout 4 while only using weapons that are wait for it, dairy. And before I continue, I'd like to direct you toward Mitten Squad, who I'm shamelessly aping the idea and style of this video from. He has a ton of creative and entertaining challenge runs for various games on his channel. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and the only reason I don't feel guilty about making a video in such a similar style is because I know that I'm nowhere near prominent enough to risk stealing any amount of thunder from him. And because if he made a video of this exact same challenge, it would be undoubtedly better received than mine anyway. You should absolutely check him out if you've somehow found this video without knowing about his channel. The main rule of this playthrough is that I cannot use any weapon that is not a randomized legendary weapon dropped by a legendary enemy. This means that I also can't use the scripted unique weapons such as Kellogg's pistol, which always spawn with the same effects and in the same places. It also means I can't use throwable weapons like grenades. I allowed myself to attack with bare fists only up until I found my first legendary weapon. And finally, to keep the spirit of the challenge alive, I don't allow myself to purposely reload saves to try for better legendary drops. However, I can upgrade and customize the weapons I find in any way I please. I briefly considered only letting myself wear random legendary armor pieces as well, but that would make the playthrough significantly more annoying, and I might be able to milk another video out of that idea, so we'll shelve it for now.
Stop a mate from driving drunk. Legend.
Because I can't predict what types of weapons I'll be able to use, my starting stat spread is a balanced one that allows me to pick up every perk that increases the damage of various weapon types, as well as the ones that allow me to customize any weapon type and scrounger from the luck tree to ensure that I don't run out of ammo no matter what guns I find. I do have some mods installed, which I've listed in the description, but it's nothing that changes the balance of the game, and hopefully none of them will cause any With that out of the way, let's allow our flat-faced, legend-obsessed hero to tell us what he's going to do.
I'll find who did this, and I'll get you. I promise.
Until I can get my hands on a legendary drop, the game's going to be more Roach Boxing Simulator than anything else. All the decidedly unlegendary weapons in the vault are automatically equipped if you pick them up, and there's no way to unequip them until you get the Pip-Boy. So if you want to try this challenge at home and don't want to have to reload and go through the vault 3 times, just don't touch the batons or pistols down here. You know the drill by now, so after we leave the vault and ransack the houses of our former neighbors, it's finally time to begin our legendary journey out into the Wasteland. Skipping past the Museum of Freedom to save time in the video, and definitely not because I forgot to turn OBS on, I get my first suit of power armor, grab the minigun, and immediately put it away in favor of my souped-up mechanical fists, which are now surprisingly effective at breaking raider faces. Here's how you kill the Conquered Deathclaw without a weapon. Step 1. Leave as many raiders alive as possible and set the Deathclaw off, then run away and let them fight each other. Step 2. Find Gristle, who now looks more like actual Gristle than a human being, and take his key for later. Step 3. Get lucky and have a raider blow up a car and break both the Deathclaw's legs, totally removing it as a threat. Step 4. Forget that enemy limbs regenerate in this game and get attacked by the once again threatening Deathclaw and realize that you're not going to beat it in a fair fight. Step 5. Hop yourself up on every drug, but forget to take Buff out, the literal melee damage drug, somehow, and realize that you're still not going to beat it, mostly because of that stupid cinematic grab attack. Step 5. Hide in the hardware store and let Preston do most of the hard work for you. If you follow all of the previous steps correctly, Todd Howard himself will smile upon you, yeet the Deathclaw into orbit, and finish it off for you. I made a trip back to Sanctuary because even if Preston Garvey is good for nothing else, his early quests give a ton of experience. Sturgis has some simple jobs for me as well, and the food planting task gives me a reason to head to Abernathy Farm to pick up the quest to get a locket back. After borrowing a cup of potatoes and finishing Sturgis's quest, we're off to USAF Olivia, where more often than not I've found a legendary radroach in the locked basement. After the Deathclaw fight, I turned the difficulty up from normal to very hard and left it that way for the rest of the game, to maximize my odds at legendary enemies spawning. However, as this classy scavenger demonstrates, this makes my mechanical fists considerably less effective, meaning I need a proper weapon ASAP. On the way to Olivia, I grabbed some valuables to sell from the robotics disposal ground. A crash chopper contained a couple more power armor pieces in better condition, and with absolutely no more unnecessary distractions, I reached the Air Force station. The guards outside provided little in the way of an obstacle, but I knew a serious fight awaited me inside. But my good friends Medex and Psycho gave me the power and protection I needed to beat my way through Ak and her goons. After I awoke from my roid rage, I found the locket, picked my way into the basement, and found no legendary roach. Undeterred and looking classy as hell, I repaired and upgraded my trusty armor, cashed in Blake's quest, and continued without any unnecessary distractions toward my next best option, and every survival mode player's favorite location, the Double Meat Co-op. This bridge to the co-op is a location for random encounters and can be quite dangerous. I've seen super mutants and even a Mr. Gutsy here before at fairly low levels. However, this time there was only the last pre-war remnants of Ned Lamont's highway toll booths. And then there weren't.
Him? When his ticket came up, they burned him alive on a pile of tires.
I read online that this blue tent behind the grain silos is guaranteed to spawn a legendary radroach when you approach it, and lo and behold it did. Unfortunately,
this world can officially bite my ass.
feeling downcast, I made the best choice of the playthrough and decided to hit up the federal ration stockpile since it was nearby. My incredible stealth skills allowed me to walk straight into Red Tourette's office unopposed, and, while she did put up a good fight, beat her senseless with some chemical assistance. Her turrets were ironically much more dangerous and annoying than she was. However, this tactless display of meat-headed audacity apparently pleased Todd Howard because he granted me a legendary raider in the next room, who I excitedly splattered all over the walls and acquired my first proper weapon, an instigating board. Double damage on the first hit is an amazing legendary effect, and I used my saved-up perks to maximize its effectiveness right away. Going from tedious and low-damage punching to one-shotting basic enemies with my superior wood technology was incredibly satisfying, and I would have been content if that was all I got out of this location. But yet another legendary raider was down here, netting me a freezing bolt-action pipe pistol that I lost the footage of picking up because editing 3 hours of gameplay into entertaining 5-minute clips occasionally causes things to go wrong. This won't be the last time something like this happens, and I apologize in advance. I left the way I came and returned to Sanctuary to beef up my weapons, give them proper names, and plant some crops to start passively generating adhesive for future upgrades. I tested out Buzzsaw Louie on some drug-dealing scum, and the results were everything I had dreamed of. From there, I hit up all the easy early-game locations for ammo, loot, and experience. These Mirelurks were the first opportunity where I used the freezing rifle, and learned that despite the increased damage, it's still fairly underwhelming against anything with any sort of armor. The crit freeze effect is a pretty good meme, but the damage output itself leaves a lot to be desired for such a slow-firing weapon. As a result, I ended up using my big stick more often than my gun. However, it was pretty good to have a long-range option for sneak attacks and other times I needed it. I also ditched the power armor in Sanctuary at this point because even on very hard, it's making me a little bit too invincible now that I had gathered a decent stock of fusion cores. Next, I went to Lexington to see all the best sights, including the zombie-infested supermarket, the rich guy hanging from a basketball hoop, this apartment with really good mood lighting, and these annoying raiders on the balcony who think they're legendary enough to match me. Here's what my perk tree looks like, by the way. Corvega was next, and while I know this sick kill montage makes it look like I'm doing a great job, it was actually a little too hot out there for me, so I headed inside, played peekaboo with this raider, and proceeded to clear the entire inside of Corvega of raider scum before going to fight Jared. Then this bullshit happened. As it turns out, grenades hurt a lot. I decided I was not fucking around with stealth or subtlety on my second playthrough, went straight to Jared's room and killed his ass first, then went and killed everyone else on the inside and outside of the factory, grabbed the repair bobblehead, and headed north. I made it to Ten Pines Bluff to get some free quest experience since I'd subconsciously done Preston's quest for them anyway. My adhesive farm in Sanctuary is sorely lacking mute fruit, so I borrowed some from Grey Garden and then went over to Lexington to help out Dance. He didn't want to pay me, so instead I took my fee in the form of all his ammo and drugs. He glitched out when I told him I was ready to go and forgot to do his iconic helmet equipping animation before leaving the police station and kept his head exposed for the entire quest. I did this mission in the most optimal way, looting all the synths and picking up their weapons to get over 1,000 fusion cells while Dance did all the heavy lifting, and I thanked him for his services by cooking him well done with a rocket engine. He got better. We finished the quest, Dance gave me a scripted unique laser rifle that I can't use, and I did another round of crafting, including making replacement parts for the Nice, so that as long as I can access any weapon bench, I can freely convert it between a long-range rifle and a short-range hand cannon to suit my needs. I proceeded to never do this once. Bored and ready for big city livin', I started the journey toward Diamond City, but the sky opened up pretty bad and something started to smell like wet dog. I happened to be near Beantown Brewery, so I stopped inside for a nice hot mug of beans, but found that this was complete false advertising and there was nary a bean in sight. There were raiders, though, and a 200 IQ Tower Tom who thinks he's playing Mirror's Edge instead of Fallout. I took a roundabout path to Diamond City and happened to stop in at this comfy lakeside estate, squashed some bugs, and found a legendary radroach that dropped the weapon that would be the savior of this playthrough. Look at it. Bask in its glory. After that, I ran into my old neighbors, out of habit almost listened to Piper and McDonough bitching at each other before remembering that I don't have to and that I don't care. Diamond City has plenty of work available for an ambitious space cadet, and plenty more freely available adhesive components to fuel my weapon crafting addiction. I handed over some bug guts to a mentally unstable lady, picked up trash for an ungrateful cancer patient,
You're lost, jackass.
and bribed a homeless man with soda to travel to Sanctuary so that I can have more workers for my ever-expanding glue plantation. Speaking of Sanctuary, Gun Nut 2 allows me to upgrade the submachine gun to its maximum potential, and I eagerly took it out for its maiden voyage at Hardware Town. As it turns out, it's good. It's really, really good. Although I did get murked on my first attempt by a close-range sniper rifle. The weather outside was frightful, so I headed down into the Mass Pike Tunnel. The first legendary ghoul I found went down instantly to an instigating crit for quadruple damage and dropped a legitimately interesting but ultimately useless armor piece. My second encounter was much more dangerous as I didn't have a crit primed to deal with this next legendary ghoul, or with the goddamn glowing one that bum-rushed me and refused to take any damage. I'm not ashamed to admit that Dog totally saved my ass here by distracting the ghouls so I could focus on them one at a time, and I got a humorously ironic but ultimately useless armor drop from the legendary. When I emerged from the other side of the tunnel, I ran headfirst into some raiders, and I guess 2 is the number of the day, because I found myself spit-roasted between 2 legendaries, one on each sniper position above the tunnel. Dog and I took them out carefully, with one dropping a decent plasma 10mm, and the other dropping disappointing trash. I modded out the pistol, but for the life of me couldn't think of a good name for it. Deciding that it was best not to force it and that one would come to me naturally as I murdered people with it, I went to the Boston Public Library and set off that event where you help an army of robots fight an army of mutants. 2 legendary super mutants spawned in this group, one of them dropping the most useless weapon so far, and the other dropping a lucky pistol that I quickly replaced my plasma one with. I got into a fight with some raiders, including a legendary in the streets of Boston, and got a weapon that's admittedly low in damage but very high in meme potential. Next up, I went to Park Street Station to save Nick Valentine, and the triggermen down here surprised me with how resilient they were against my assassin bullets and how adamant they were about not giving me any gear. I killed no less than 3 legendary wise guys on my way into the vault, and not one of them dropped a decent weapon. I grabbed Nick, peacefully defused the situation with Skinny Malone's crew, and upgraded my new toys. Before meeting up with Nick, I did some jobs for Paladin Dance's lackeys, leading me to this legendary ghoul in Hubris Comics who dropped in an absolutely amazing legendary laser rifle with a straight-up 25% damage increase on every shot. I returned to Diamond City, was reminded why I hate Piper, bribed the mayor's secretary for Kellogg's house key using the massive amounts of caps I've made by selling all the useless guns I picked up, gave Dogmeat a whiff of Kellogg's cigar, and ignored the mission to follow him by instead fast-traveling to the closest location I've discovered to Fort Hagen. I got distracted and Nick and I shot up some trailer park ghouls. We arrived at Fort Hagen, I discovered that my little 10mm is quite effective at tearing apart synths, and we encountered no major obstacles until it was finally time to confront Cornflakes himself. Kellogg wanted to have a chat man-to-man, so I obliged him, then loaded myself up with Psychojet and unloaded half of a 100-round drum mag from the Nothin' personnel into the Cereal Man's bald face. I would have killed him in that single burst if he hadn't immediately popped a stealth boy, but he didn't last too much longer anyway. I looted everything from his body, including ripping his think meats out. Nick is under the mistaken impression that Piper will be of any use to us at all. We watched the Brotherhood swoosh into the Commonwealth, Piper proved herself as useless as I thought she'd be, I kitted out and named my precious new baby, and then got myself hopelessly lost on the silky smooth 25 FPS streets of downtown Boston before making it to Good Neighbor. I found out that if you have Nick as a companion when you walk into this town for the first time, you can imply that Finn the insurance hustler has a small dick. Hancock killed him before I could explain how funny this joke was, and then I fast-forwarded through Kellogg's memories. Except this one because I actually really like the animations here. I got my next lead to look for Virgil in the glowing sea. I dusted off my old power armor and set off to the southwest of the map. Right before reaching the border, a legendary Deathclaw hopped out of this house to attack me. Fortunately, a Brotherhood vertibird was right nearby to lend some air support, and I discovered somewhat late in the fight that the laser rifle is definitely my best option for dealing with these things. It dropped, ironically, a worse legendary laser rifle. I entered the glowing sea and immediately encountered a Deathclaw, which I had no choice but to attack. Just as I was about to kill it, I got swarmed by a group of bloodbugs, one of which was a legendary Red Widow, then another goddamn Deathclaw decided to join in on the fun too. I survived somehow, and all I got was this dumb sword. I encountered 2 more legendaries on my glowing odyssey, but the notable one was this Rad Scorpion who dropped a hunting rifle with a mediocre effect, but the damage potential is still way better than the bolt action. Anyway, I made it to Virgil, he told me I need to get a Courser chip, and on my way to do that I got distracted by all the new activity at Cambridge Police Station now that the Brotherhood's main army had arrived. Since the Space Nazis are the only faction I've never played, and because my collection of legendaries is kind of the same thing as their technology hoarding, I decided I'll ally with them on this playthrough. My conviction was tested immediately when I saw a legendary Brotherhood aspirant in the police station, but I stayed true to my path by convincing myself that she would probably just drop another goddamn synth arm piece if I had a nickel for every. Dance took me up on a ride to the Hindenburg and all but ordered me to shoot a minigun at dirty scavvers below who pose no possible threat to us, which I did, because if anyone asks me why later, I can say I was just doing my job. While writing this script, I realized that this technically violates the rule of this run, but since I was just shooting randomly into buildings, rivers, and the Pridwin, and didn't actually hit anything, and since the Vertibird minigun isn't technically classified as an equipped weapon, I'm willing to forgive myself for it. Up on the Led Zeppelin, I started getting shit on by people for not looking like a proper soldier, which may have been due to my long greasy hair, and may have been due to the fact that I was wearing a brightly colored mining helmet with the lamp part glitched down next to my feet instead of on my head. I made myself a vodka soda while Führer Maxon gave a speech about the Institute being bad, said hi to the war criminals I'll be working with for the rest of the game, read some terminal entries about how everyone in the Brotherhood considers Maxon to be a literal, unironic Ubermensch, and had Dance try on my hat collection before deciding that the brown flight helmet matches his aesthetic pretty well. I lost some footage here due to managing my computer's memory poorly, so here's my best artistic representations to fill in the gaps. Maxon gives Dance and I a mission to wipe out some mutants before they figure out how to arm and fire nukes. I remembered that I was supposed to be looking for my son, went to Green Tech Genetics and absolutely melted through the gunners there with my Tommy gun. I had Dance as my companion at this point, but I think there's something wrong with his AI because he refused to draw a weapon at any point after we left the Pridwin, so I was essentially doing this quest by myself. This was fine for most of it, but really annoying when I had to fight the Courser. But as usual for any tough fights, a healthy cocktail of Med-X and Psychojet allowed me to carry the day. My go-to expert for examining garbage that I pull out of people's skulls, Dr. Amari, informed me that the railroad is my only option for decoding the Courser chip. I got a new haircut and went to do my mutant killing quest for the Fourth Reich, but not before dismissing and recruiting Dance again to fix his pacifism issues. I thought I'd run into a problem when I started the quest. You can walk over to Fort Strong, but the quest marker directs you toward a vertibird that gives you a ride over there, which I did. I know that the game expects you to use the minigun to kill all the mutants on the exterior, but I assumed it would either land eventually if I took too long, or I'd be able to simply jump out of the chopper while wearing power armor, land safely, and continue the fight from the ground. Using the minigun for actual combat would be a clear violation of the rules of the challenge. However, from what I can tell, you can't actually exit the chopper in this quest. I pressed E, I pressed Enter, I held down both of them, and nothing worked. I also didn't land, instead just circling the island over and over with no sign of stopping. I also couldn't fast travel. While I was Googling to see if I was going to need to just reload a save, I heard the sound of explosions and saw flashes, blinding flashes, and found myself on the ground. Apparently, the behemoth had thrown enough rocks into our pilot's rotors that we went down in a flaming heap. Dance and I were alive, though, so all's well that ends well. We put down the big lad and his goons without too much difficulty, and the mighty laser rifle continued to live up to its name. The inside of Fort Strong was an easy clap, and Maxon rewarded me with some very unlegendary signal grenades as a reward. I can't continue on the Brotherhood's questline without decoding the courser chip at the railroad, and I don't have the Old North Church's location memorized like I do Fort Higgins, so I started on the Freedom Trail at Goodneighbor and followed it the hard way through Mutant City to the church. Took a wild guess that their door password is the name of their organization, and got the courser chip analyzed while I borrowed their stove to make myself a snack. I fended off a bear attack at Sanctuary and returned to Virgil, who explained some science stuff at me and sent me on my way. I told Maxim what I'd discovered and put together the relay setup at Boston Airport. Before I had a chance to question the safety of teleporting me via radio signal during a severe thunderstorm, Ingram threw the switch and sent me to the Institute. I met my fake son, then my real son, pretended to be okay with his atrocities, and introduced myself to the most important people in the Institute, especially the one I'm supposed to be recruiting. I died horribly in the FEV lab, tried again and didn't die, and got the evidence Dr. Lee demanded, as well as the serum for Virgil, because the only thing better than a dead mutant is a living human. With my business finished at the Institute, I subjected myself to several hours of grocery shopping for Ingram so we can do the same epic cutscene with the same big robot from Fallout 3 again. Dr. Lee didn't want to do her job, so I manipulated her emotions until she said yes. I fetched a magnet from a hospital and made what would be my final journey into the glowing sea to secure a cache of nukes for Liberty Prime to throw like footballs. It may seem like I'm cutting a lot out at this point, but honestly nothing much happened in the playthrough that was surprising or noteworthy. I've been so incredibly lucky with the effects on my legendaries and diligent enough at collecting enough supplies to always stay stocked on ammo, consumables, and crafting materials that there's very little in the game that can actually challenge or threaten me. Any legendary weapons I find at this point are more curiosities than anything I'd actually use, as my loadout of fully automatic weapons with a melee backup was very firmly established, and I wouldn't get much benefit out of adding anything new to it at this point unless I found a legendary Gatling laser or something insane like that. So really the rest of the run was just following the Brotherhood main story until its conclusion. Anyway, I secured my only Child of Adam casualty on this playthrough, shut down his waifu bot, and secured the nukes. Liberty Prime is up and running, but not at full power, and to make matters worse, I got called into the principal's office. Since I have garbage charisma, this conversation consisted of Maxon, who definitely doesn't look like a supervillain in this lighting, yelling at me with absolutely no way to defend myself. I received my orders to execute Dance, experienced exactly what the Brotherhood thinks of the man who served them faithfully for his entire life, and located the big guy himself. The emotional impact of the scene was dampened somewhat by the fact that Dance was wearing nothing but the flight helmet I'd given him and a pair of tidy not-so-whiteys for some reason. Despite his attire, I'll admit that this is the one scene in this entire faction that got to me a little. I'd actually come to appreciate Dance a lot, and he and Halen are probably the closest to morally good characters in the entire Brotherhood. But I figured if I'm gonna go Brotherhood this time, I might as well go full Brotherhood, and there's no way my one charisma ass is going to talk Maxon down from this. I show my respect for Paladin Dance the only way I can at this point, by making his execution quick and clean. Ad Victoriam, brother. I've gotta say, even the Institute, the designated villain route, felt like less of a villain route than this one did. The perfectly timed lightning strikes probably don't help. After shitting on Dance's grave and giving me a Klingon-style promotion, Maxon sent me to Kells, who ordered me to go wipe out a vastly technologically inferior faction who poses no real threat to us, but honestly at this point I was just smiling and nodding. Christ, look at these dialogue options. They're pushing you to roleplay a bloodthirsty psychopath in half of your possible voice lines. I got distracted, fought some mechanist robots, and died stupidly before just going straight to the church and shooting it up like I was told to. I wasn't even using power armor or advanced weapons, and there was still nothing that could stand in my way until I got to the heart of the HQ. Glory turned me into Swiss cheese on my first attempt because I hit the wrong hotkey when I meant to top myself off with a refreshing beverage, and because I mistakenly assumed that some of the Brotherhood would actually help me out here. On my second attempt, there were no such mistakes. I hacked and stole Pam, and with that the Brotherhood were no more. Ingram surprised me by actually giving a rat's ass about Dance, and then we flew off to get the last part for Liberty Prime. Once again, I thought I'd made a huge mistake. The vertibird kept circling the tower, expecting me to use this disgustingly mundane minigun to shoot all the synths, and even if it was possible to jump out this time, there wasn't anywhere to land safely on the chopper's circling route. Fortunately, all I need to do is keep myself topped off on health, and the chopper eventually comes in to drop Ingram and I off, and the mission can continue. Ingram and I made a very efficient team as we fought our way down the building, although I did have a strange situation where this legendary synth got disarmed, ran away, and completely gave me the slip. I followed him into the back room and checked all the corners, but I never ended up fighting where We reached the basement, got the thing, and I used my sophisticated hacking techniques to safely and efficiently deactivate the automated security. I returned to Boston Airport, suited up in Dance's armor, and pressed the big red button to turn on our death bot. What followed was over 10 minutes of watching Liberty Prime walk slowly to CIT, with brief moments of him chucking nukes at synths that got in our way. The scripted scene of him manhandling a behemoth was pretty good, though. I hopped down the hole and discovered that with power armor, my great weapons, and all the Brotherhood's might at my back, there wasn't even a hint of challenge in this final quest. I accidentally contributed to this aspirant's death by clipping him with my shotgun several times when I meant to shoot this angry gorilla, and cleared out the main hall. I got out of my power armor and took off my sunglasses for the first time in a long time to talk to Sean, who rightly called me out for my actions and said goodbye to him using the weapon that started this all off. I fought my way to the generator, found one last legendary for the road, armed the bomb, teleported out, destroyed the Institute and everyone inside it, and beat Fallout 4 using only legendary weapons. Thank you so much for watching. Another reminder to check out Mitten Squad for many more videos in this same style, and please leave a like and maybe a comment if you liked it. See you next time.